Okay, so now that you guys have mastered, or at least started to get the basics on the pass line and the odds, we're going to move on to the next thing. So the next piece are called come bets. And at one point in time for craps, they were the predominant additional bet beyond the pass line. Now it's probably the number two, but since it ties in with the pass line, we go over it at this point. Plus, it enables you to get even better at paying the pass line as well. So, as we know, once there is a point, let's say we're a $10 table, make it easy. Once there's a point, say it's the 9 or something, then the player can go ahead and put their odds down. We've already covered that, and we've covered how the odds pay, double blackjack, cheap blackjack. What if they want to play other numbers? What if they want to play other numbers? This is like I said, the second most common way of doing it, and it's a pretty wide gap between first and second, but this still gets played a lot. You will deal to this every single day, multiple times throughout the day. The come bet is placed right here in the come. It is a self-service bet, just like the pass line, which means they put it down themselves. And the best way to think about a come bet is starting a brand new game. A come bet is the equivalent of turning around to another table that has no point and putting a bet down on the pass line. That is basically what it is. That's exactly what it is. It is starting a brand new game. So what that means is that while this bet right here is in the come, it is the equivalent of this bet when there is no point. Now this is going to get pretty complicated. There's going to be some drills later on, and the thing about the come bets and eventually the place bets, but especially the come bets and the don't comes, is that it's really going to sink in pretty close to the end of phase two. When we tie everything together is when you will see how this all ties in together and how it all works. So consider this more of a familiarization than anything else, because the drills are going to be very basic. You'll do pieces of the come bet at a time, and then when we tie it all, everything together at the end of phase two, it's all just going to click. But once again, a come bet while the point is on, you cannot bet the come when there is no point. And the reason for that is, that's what this is. The pass line bet when the point is off. That's what a come bet is in the come when the point is on. So what that means is, if you will remember, you will know how this wins or loses while it is in the come. Because again, it's the equivalent of a pass line bet with no point. So what that means is a 2, 3, or 12 rolls, this loses. If a 7 or 11 rolls, this wins. So some people like to try and bet this because they think it's a hedge over here. If a 7 rolls, they lose here, but they'll win here. It's kind of silly. It's also besides the point as far as dealing goes. Now, the next roll of the dice will set the point for this come bet. Because the pass line bet already has the point set here as a 9. Obviously, we can't have 6 pucks out at the table. That would be extraordinarily confusing. So how do we signify what point is set for this come bet? Well, let's say an 8 rolls. We're going to take the come bet and we're going to slide it inside the box. The way I like to term it to players is that the bet itself is the puck. The bet will show you what number it is betting on. Now, just like with the pass line, a come bet can get odds because, again, it is just a pass line bet. It's just a brand new game is all it is. But we don't have any place behind the bet to put the odds. So how do we put the odds? We put it directly on top of the bet, but forward about a third to half of the width of the flat bet. So it is offset forwards on the flat bet. Now, 2 questions that I know you guys are probably having. First one is, how do I know where to put this? How do I know where to put this bet? Well, these boxes correspond to the table. When we're on this side of the table, this 8 will curve this way, because this side of the table is curving this way. The 8 will curve this way. But we don't do anything with the sides. So we only use the front and the back. So these front four spots, and let me show you, It's 4 chips wide. These front 4 spots are the bottom hook. There are these 4 spots right here. And then these back 4 spots are once you get past the hook. Now on this side of the table, because the table curves this way, on this side of the table, that means that this bet right here, the number 1 position, is the player closest to the stick person. They're right over there. They're in that number 1 position. That also means that this player right here is at the bottom of the hook. They're still on that side of the table, but they're at the bottom of the hook. This player right here is at the top of the hook. They've already curved around the table. And this player is right here, is the closest player to the base dealer. On the other side of the table, it would all reverse. It would reverse because the table is going in the opposite direction on the curve. So once the number rolls, that sets the point for the come bet, it slides inside the box. One thing that is very important, critically important, this bet cannot touch these lines. This flat bet must be entirely within the box. Cannot touch these lines. You will find out why in phase 2. It's a different type of bet that will touch those lines. And then they get to place their odds. Should they choose, they don't have to place odds, but should they choose, they can go ahead and place their odds. Now, come bets are self-service bets, and they are bet in the come. We treat them just like a pass line bet. So when we pay a pass line bet, do we hand that money off to the player, or do we pay the pass line bet and then just leave it right there on the pass line? We leave it right there. It's a self-service bet. So therefore, when we're paying the come bets, we're going to leave the payouts right there in the come where they bet it. Now remember, you always pay with your outside hand. You always hand off. So on this side of the table, that would be this hand because the players are over here. So that's my outside hand. So I'm going to look at this. If an 8 were to roll, that means that this bet wins. So if this bet wins, I'm going to look at it, and you should verbalize what you were doing. You start with the odds, then you go with the flat bet, because flat bets always pay what? Even money. Flat bets always pay even money. So how do the odds pay on an 8 or a 6? Every 5 pays you $6. We've already covered that. That deals with the pass line. Again, it's just a brand new game. It's just another pass line bet. So if an 8 were to roll, a good dealer will look down at the bet and look at the odds. There's 20 odds. I know you have trouble seeing that, but there's $20 in odds, and there's a $10 flat bet. So a good dealer is going to verbalize it all out so that their box person can hear it. They're going to look at it and go, 20 pays 24 plus 10 is 34. They total it all out. 20 pays 24 plus 10 is 34. And then they're going to cut out their $34. Cut out the 34. Now, again, this is a stack that is the same height, so these should be touching. We're going to cut it out so it can be seen by the cameras, by the box person, whoever's watching. Then with our outside hand, we're going to stack it up. With our inside hand, we're going to pinch the bet so that we leave a clear demarcation of the odds and the come bet. We're going to put it down in front of the player, their position. We're going to heel off the payout. Now you put the bet down first. Then you put the payout down. We're going to heel off the payout, and we're going to say off for $34. Off for $34. Once you've been dealing for a while and no longer break in, you're not going to verbalize this as often. Very experienced dealers almost never say it unless they know they're dealing with a rookie player. And then they're going to say it just so the player knows. Now, what order do we pay? Let's say we have multiple come bets. Let me do a couple different ones. So I have 3 come bets here. I've got position next to the stick person, then I've got the number 3 spot, and then I've got the top of the hook. Well, we always pay stuff like this. Pretty much anything that's paid from this side, as in any bets placed over here, are always paid stick to base. Stick to base. So I'm going to start off with the number 1 position, and then I'm going to just kind of go down the line. So I'm going to, as I pay this, I'm going to look at it and go 10 pays 12 plus 15 is 27. Stack it with my outside hand, pinch the bet, off for $27. There's nobody on position 2, so I didn't need to worry about it. So I go to position 3. 20 pays 24 plus 10 is 34. I'm going to cut out my $34. Stack it up. outside in, and I heel it off. There's nobody in the fourth position, so then I look, 15 pays 18 plus 10 is 28. So I'm going to pay the $28, bring it out, and heel it off. And each time I'm going to say, off for 27, off for 34, off for 28. One thing, especially when you're dealing in red, that makes it very, very easy is you can use that pay by color trick that I showed you before. If I look at this, I just glance down at this bet right here. Well, I know that every red gets a red. And I know flat bets are paid even money, so I don't really need to worry about it. And when it comes to the odds, I also know that every red gets a white. So I can look at this and just know that I need 5 red and 2 white. I don't actually have to do any math. I can just look at it and say 5 red, 2 white. Except for the fact that you want to verbalize what the payout is. But as you get more advanced on it and you're not verbalizing it so much, you tend to just start paying it by color. Now, to answer a question that some of you may have out there, why do we pinch the bet like this? Here's why. Let's say we're on a $10 minimum bet table. Okay, right here we've got 10 odds with a $15 flat bet. So that 10 pays 12 plus 15 is 27. Now, and you will see dealers do this, and it is a huge, 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 huge no-no. You never squeeze the bet. You have to keep this separate, because here's what can happen. Let's say we squeeze the bet and bring it out and drop it off like this. Or even put it down and reset it like this. Well, what if the player says, no, I had 15 in odds? There's absolutely no way to prove that because you squeezed the bet. You turned it into this. You never squeezed the bet. And I have seen this happen on games because the dealers did this.
Anytime players get out, they're going to take it.
It is a jackpot waiting to happen. Well, it's not a jackpot. It's not going to be a huge, something like this. And that's the thing. We can stop the game for 10 minutes while we call up to the eye in the sky. Or in a situation like this, it's just $1 difference. Or the box just says give them $1, but they know that you messed up. So never squeeze the bet. So the next question that might pop into people's heads is, what about a situation like this? And let's say I'm doing this bet, because it is possible, and we'll show you guys how later, it is possible that I'm paying this bet and there is a bet right here still. It is possible there's something in my way, because I know you guys are thinking we would have paid this first, but it is possible that bet is still there. So how would I pay that $34? How would I grab the bet without squeezing it? Well, once I have paid it out and stacked it up, I'm just gonna slide it out and slide it out. Then I'm gonna pick it up. Always pick it up. Don't slide the bets all the way to the plate. Always pick it up. Off for $34. That way I never squeezed it, and I still got it out there, and I managed to clamp it down so that the odds did not shift. So that is the basics of come bets. We're going to move on to show a little bit more on how they are paid and how it is possible to have a bet still sitting there. Now, one thing I want to cover real fast, because I have not covered this yet, and I didn't cover it because I wanted to wait until we got to this point. I want to cover the concept of contract bets. So what is a contract bet? A contract bet is a bet that the player cannot take back. Once it is contracted, they cannot take it back. In this situation, there's something else that we call contract bets, which is where a player says, hey, I always do this, and the dealer says, okay, you always do that. That's a contract. That just means that the dealer will remember to always do it for you, but you can take that back. But these bets, they're bets that cannot be taken back. The pass line bet, once there is a point marked, can never be taken back. Why is that? Because right now, this bet favors the house. But when point was off, this bet actually favored the player, as we covered. 8 ways to win, 4 ways to lose on the come out roll if it wasn't a point. So if we allowed the players, once there is a point, to pick that bet up, this game wouldn't exist, because they would just only play the pass line. Right. And if we got a point, they'd take it down. If they didn't get a point, they'd win 2 out of every three times on average. So the casinos wouldn't even be open. So that is a contract bet. It must remain until a decision is made, win or lose. That bet can never be reduced. However, it can be increased. Players can add to their pass line bet. Why? Because they're skipping the come out roll where it favors the player, and they're going directly into when there's already a point marked, which favors the house. Here's the thing. If someone turns their $10 flat bet into a $15 flat bet, the dice roll, some number rolls, and they want to return back down to a $10 flat bet, nope. It's a contract. It's a contract bet. So since come bets are just pass line bets starting a brand new game, the flat bet on a come bet is also a contract bet. Once it travels inside the number, that means it has a point marked for it. Now it is contracted. They cannot take it down until a decision is made, win or lose. Odds are not contract bets. Players can pick them up anytime they want. If it's a come bet and they don't want to pick it up, maybe they're superstitious and they only want it off for a little while, they can turn it off, and we just put an off button on it. We don't need to signify that the flat bet is working because the flat bet can never be turned off, not while there is a point, because they cannot pick it up. So that is the concept of contract bets. So next we're going to go into some of the more advanced stuff on how come bets are paid. Okay, so as we move on to a little bit more on the come bets, let's look at if we have a few players playing come bets. Now again, we're on a $10 minimum bet table. So let's say players 1, 2, 4, and 6 are playing come bets. So the dice roll, and let's say a 6 rolls. So we go in order. We go in order from the stick person to the base dealer. That is the most important thing. That will keep you from getting lost. So we set a 6 rolls. So we're going to move this in the first position. Now we have player number 2. So this is going to move in to the second position. Now we've got player number 4. So this is going to move to the 4th spot. And then player number 6. So this one is going to move over to the 6th spot. And then the players can, of course, place some odds if they wish. They can give you their odds. Now, here's the next thing that some people tend to ask. Let's say player number 3. Now, these have all moved in. Player number 3 places a come bet, but the other players do not. Now let's say the 6 rolls. What order do I do these? Do I move them first or do I pay first? Neither. You continue going in the proper order, which is from the stick dealer to the base dealer. You deal with each position as they go in order 1 through 8, and you deal with them in their entirety, either paying or moving. So in this case, I would pay, then move, then pay, nothing, and then pay. So to see it in its entirety, 10 pays 12 plus 15 is 27. So this would be off for $27. 15 pays 18 plus 10 is 28. So we're paying off for 28. Now I go to number 3. I don't go over here and start paying it because position number 3 still has to come. So on for 15. When we talk about on, it is flat bet and flat bet only. So on for 15. 20 pays 24 plus 25 is 49. So off for 49. Nothing for position 5. And then 25 pays 30 plus 10 is 40. Off for 40. Now technically position 5 or position 6 is right here. So you start to run into this, especially here. Remember, you have this much space for your first 4 players. You have this much space for your next 4 players. So it gets very cramped over here. Okay. Now it is very, very important to always go in order. I have seen dealers that will do something like pay everybody first and then travel the other bets in. Well, the problem with that is that the second you pay, players are starting to reach. They're starting to reach. So by the time you've paid everybody, let's say I choose not to move that. Let's say I choose not to do it in order, and I decide to pay everybody first and then move that third position. It is entirely possible that by the time I have finished paying this side of the table over here looks like this. So now the dealer has to remember that these are actually brand new bets, that only this one is the one that should travel. But if they had gone in the proper order, they wouldn't have that problem. Now, for the next bit. You guys already saw how it's possible to have a flat bet next to your bet because this had traveled in before I paid 4. So I had spot number 3 with a flat bet, and then I had spot number 4 that had this entire come bet with odds. But I mentioned that it's possible to have a come bet that looks that with odds and everything already there or still there from an earlier position. So let's cover how. Because now we're going to cover what happens if they already have a flat bet, or if they already have a come bet and they place a new come bet. So there's two things. Now this right here is the most confusing thing for dealers in the come bet area. Start it this way, and then we'll go to spot number 3. So we've got 2 players playing come bets, and they're doing kind of a continuous come bet. They're keeping them out there. So let's say a 6 rolls. Okay, so 6 rolls. So I'm going to start with position number 1, and I'm always going to look inside first. So I'm going to look inside, and then I'm going to look in the come. Because if they don't have a come bet, then it's what we already covered. We're going to go 20 pays 24 plus 10 is 34. Pay our 34, bring it out like we've already done a few times. But instead, I look here, and then I look over here, and they also have a new come bet. So I need to make a lightning quick decision, which is actually very, very easy. But you need to make this not really decision, but this observation. You need to make this observation. I need to look at their new come bet, and I need to look at their old flat bet. I do not look at the odds. I only look at the flat bet. What do I see? I see a $10 come bet, and I see a $10 flat come bet. So their contract portion of the bet is identical. It is the same. What that means is I look at this and go 20 pays 24 plus 10 is 34, and I cut out my $34, stack it up with my outside hand, and I never lay a finger on this bet. Off and on for $34. Because as we've covered, when we pay it, it is off, and when we move the new one in, it is on. They have the same flat bet. This is extremely important. This is probably the most important thing with the come bets. You have to understand this. If their flat bet is the same, then they are paid off and on. Off and on. Now, why is that? Well, let's take a look at something. Let's say we actually moved it out. Okay? 99% of players that play come bets will do the exact same odds every single time. So I want you to look at the table. I want you to look at the table, and I want you to look at this bet right here, and I want you to look at this bet right here, okay? Keep looking at those. So let's say we were to actually move it off, okay? So we have a $10 flat bet with 20 odds. Off for $34, on for 10, and then the player does the same odds again, which 99% of them do. You notice that we are back in the exact same position that we were when we just said off and on for $34. You notice the table, the bets, everything looks exactly identical. That's why we don't move them. Because 99% of the time, they're going to do the same odds, and nothing is going to change. So why do all these extra added motions? So, next we go to position number 2. They have no come bet, and they have no new come bet. Okay, we're going to move this over to position 3. Right? They have no new come bet. So now we go to position 3, and I look down here, and I see that they've got a come bet that I need to pay. And then I look over, and I see they have a new come bet that needs to travel. So what's the decision that I need to make? What's the observation that I need to make? I need to look at the flat bets. I need to look at the flat bets and see if they are the same. They have a $15 flat bet here that is traveling inside the number. They have a $10 flat bet here that is being paid. Because these flat bets are not the same, you have to separate out what you're doing. So 15 pays 18 plus 10 is 28. So I cut out the 28, pick it up with my outside hand. Then again, I pinch this so it does not separate. Now here's the thing. You cannot have two bets and a payout on the table at the same time. You shouldn't. So I'm going to bring this out. When I place it down in front of the player, I'm going to pick up the new come bet, and then I'm going to say off for $28, on for $15. Off for $28, on for $15. Now they can place their odds. But the flat bets being different means you have to bring it out and you have to travel in the new come bet. And again, you don't want two bets and a payout sitting down on the table at the same time. So you're not going to, and I've seen dealers do this so bad. I don't see a lot of them do it, but I have seen dealers do this. Where they put out the bet, put out the payout, and then travel the new bet. That is the wrong way to do it. Wrong way to do it. So this covers the basics of the come bets and how they pay. And, well, not the basics. This covers the entirety of come bets and how they pay. So we will be moving on. This actually would put you at approximately the halfway point in phase 1. So next, we're going to be moving on to the dark side. Now, for people that are interested in the drills that we would run to really sink this stuff into your heads when we would teach it in a school, check us out on Patreon, because when this video releases, we will also have at least 2 come bet drills released on our Patreon for our fans, and detailing how to set the come bet drill up, and then how it works and the whys. Otherwise, stay tuned, because we're going to move on to the dark side.